Welcome to the Burning Ledgers podcast, a podcast for CFOs by CFOs, exploring how AI is reshaping finance, from technology to strategy to execution. I'm Matthias Steinberg, and for today's episode, we have Rachel Kirkham, CTO of MindBridge.ai. We'll talk about the future of audit and assurance. Let's light it up. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Matthias. It's nice to see you again.
I should say, before we start, we've been working together for now 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so today you're one of the first, the guests of one of the first episodes. I'm very new to being a podcast host. I don't know how often you have been a guest at a podcast.
A few times, yeah, but not too many times.
Okay, so you're the pro, and I'm a first timer here. So, but I'm sure you'll help me through this. Rachel, so let's dive right in. You have a background as an auditor. I think that moved into you being becoming a data scientist, and now you are the CTO of an AI company, a company that builds AI technology for finance. Introduce yourself and talk us through a little bit more of your professional journey.
Yeah, sure. So, okay. So if I start from the very beginning, before I went to train as an accountant and an auditor, and before I joined the UK public sector, actually, when I left school, I actually wanted to work in technology. I actually trained to work on an IT support desk. So I learned to build computers, and I started doing the MCSE, which is a network certification. And this was right when the economic crash happened. So it was actually quite difficult to get a job. So I ended up joining the UK Civil Service. And then subsequently, I went on to train to be an accountant and an auditor at the National Audit Office in the United Kingdom. And that was quite a different direction to working in technology. But during that time, so I worked at the NEO for a decade, and I would say I started my data science journey about 3 years into that. So I've been a data scientist for 13 years. And the reason I got into data science was because the National Audit Office audits some of the largest organizations in the country. So, things like the Tax Authority, HMRC. I actually audited one of the largest consolidations in the world, so the consolidation of the UK government into a single set of financial statements. And because of that, there's a huge volume of data. So you really need to have different methods to be able to handle this data. So I went on to secondment to work for Parliament, actually. And when I was in Parliament, I noticed that the UK government was publishing a lot of data and people weren't really making use of it. So I decided to learn to program. And so that's when I became a data scientist. And after teaching myself to program, I started to use programming to do a variety of different audit tasks, because there's a lot of different things you could automate using programming languages in audit. And through that, I ended up becoming head of data analytics research at the NAO. So I was looking at when I left, there was about 100 different projects we were looking at where we were using analytics to do different kinds of audit procedures. And as part of that role, I ended up coming into contact with MindBridge. So I met Robin Grosset, our former chief technology officer. He actually came to do the pilot. And one of Gordon, who used to be one of our sales executives, his favorite stories was telling them of when I started asking Robin questions about how the algorithms worked, and Robin was getting increasingly flustered. And I think it was the first time he'd really had a customer that had enough knowledge to ask him some detailed questions about how the algorithms operated. And so
You got probably worried for MindBridge's IP.
Yeah, but because of that, Robin stayed in contact, actually. And so they asked me if I could give them some feedback on a project they've been working on. And I was like, oh, actually, I'm quite interested in coming to help. So that's how I came to MindBridge. And I think over my career here at MindBridge, it's been really interesting to see the evolution of both the AI industry as a whole, the data science profession, and our platform and our technology. And it's a really exciting time to be in AI. As CTO, I'm just super excited to bring some of the newest advances in AI into MindBridge and provide our customers with increasing levels of value. It's really important to me that we're a true AI company and that we really help accounting and finance and audit to kind of harness this technology to make us better as professionals. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about me.
So I think it's very clear that you've been working on using technology and AI for well over a decade now. I think. I mean, how long have you been at MindBridge?
5 years. Yeah.
5 years, and before that, you were already working on that. And I think sometimes because ChatGPT really brought AI on, into everyone's living room, we equate AI with LLMs and with ChatGPT. That's part of the story, but it's not the full story. I think, and I think it's important to mention that you and MindBridge have been working on artificial intelligence in audit and in finance already well before ChatGPT was ever born.
Oh yes, yeah, no, 100%. And large language models are good at some tasks, some interesting tasks actually. I think we're going to talk about that later. But the volume of data that large enterprises are producing, they can't look at that level of data, and they certainly can't analyze the relationships in that data to find the patterns of things that are unusual. So, the other kinds of AI and machine learning that are available, they're complementary technologies to large language models, and actually they can fit together into a whole that is much more powerful than either technology by itself. So,
yeah. Okay, so let's start. I thought that was a great intro to the topic that we really want to discuss today, and that is, what does the future of audit look like? I can say, from my perspective, I think as I'm a CFO, I speak for probably any finance professional that has ever been involved in audit. No one has ever said, as is right now happening, can't wait till the next audit starts. It's a very, very like core part of what we do, what we have to do. There's, of course, it plays an important role, and having your financials audited is very important for building trust. But I think it's also fair to say that there is quite a bit of frustration at least on the client side around how audit is done, and we are all really interested to understand how technology can help to change that. Why don't we start? You putting on your hat as an auditor. In your view, what's the state of audit and maybe shall I say audit and assurance today? What's the state of play both on the auditors and on the audited on the client side?
yeah, okay. So I think with external audit, so we'll start with external audit, and I think we will talk about inside of the enterprise as well. With external audit, the industry really is in flux. And I think there are a number of opportunities to enhance or to automate audit procedures today that with these technologies, which will allow the auditors time to do some of the more sophisticated parts of the audit, right? So when we think about audit today, there is a range of kind of really quite repetitive tasks that auditors have to perform in order to kind of get the assurance they need. So things like sample testing, substantive analytical procedures, manual journals testing, all of these activities, they're quite labor intensive. And, I always thought as an auditor, if I select a sample of 100 out of 100,000 items, how much assurance does that really give me, right? And you can draw statistical conclusions over a population, right? That's the basis of audit. But wouldn't you like to do more testing? I always wanted to get a deeper level of comfort, right, over the balances that I was auditing. And AI really offers us the opportunity to improve audit quality because you can look at all of the transactions and not just look at that sample. So I think that there's a big opportunity to automate some of the really kind of resource intensive parts of audit. And then that gives the auditors the opportunity to really look at where were the big judgments made in the financial statements. you know, sometimes that work is kind of uh, left to the end, or it takes a long time and you don't feel like you have quite enough time to really talk to the client about like the accounting judgments that they've made. And actually that should be really the core area of the audit.
Yeah.
So yeah, automating a lot of the kind of routine stuff is definitely got to be number one priority. One of the things I would say about some of the more complex accounting standards, like revenue from contracts with customers, there's actually opportunities here for LLMs to start helping look at contractual terms and compare that to the transactions that are being posted in the ledger. So
Mhm.
I actually think the scope of automation is probably broader than just the kind of routine testing, and it could start to extend into the application of accounting standards and how well those have been done by the different audited bodies. So that's going to be an area where I think auditors, it will take time to adopt this technology because they will have to build trust in the technology, right? I think one of the things MindBridge is really focused on is providing transparent and explainable AI to auditors, and trying to give them enough contextual information about what the system has done so that they can trust it. When we start to bring LLMs into the mix, and we're looking at large kind of populations, or something that's potentially quite judgmental and higher risk, there is going to need to be uh, even greater trust in that system. And I'm not sure the audit profession is ready for that, right? So I would say one of the big things external audit
Yeah.
firms really need to do is start building up their AI competencies, because the technology is going to fundamentally transform the industry, right?
Yeah.
But I can see signs, right? The ICAW, for example, had a conference this year on AI assurance. So, how do you get assurance over the AI technologies? And I think that was really a really interesting thing for them to do. So, the profession is starting to see that actually there needs to be more assurance over the technologies that are being used. And actually, when I was at that conference, a lot of people were asking how could they use AI to do their audit. So, there
Yeah.
is there's signs of life, right? And there was a really great session at our conference with the Christina Ho from the PCAOB, and I'd really encourage people to watch that. But I think the regulators are actually starting to think about the impact of AI on audit, and that is like the best thing that could happen to the audit industry, because if the regulators can be more supportive of the adoption of technology, it has the power to really transform the industry. So.
Yeah. Can we do a little journey? Like, imagine it's 2035. You're a CFO. You get up in the morning. What does your job and your day look like with regards to audit and assurance, both internal and
Yes.
external?
So I think this is where this is a conversation I've had with myself for a really long time, actually, and I think there is a really good opportunity for firm companies of lots of different sizes strengthening their internal control environment using AI. So being able to, as a CFO, come in and look at a dashboard and say, okay, this is how my business is operating, and there's a risky transaction that's been posted to my ledger, and I might want to go and kind of ask the financial controller what's going on, or really try and understand if that's something that I need to be worried about or not. And the level of transparency that you have as a CFO as you get into bigger and bigger companies kind of decreases a little bit, right? Because you become further away from how your different business entities are operating. You've got multiple accounting teams and systems. So I think AI has the opportunity to really start to surface things across your enterprise, even if you're looking at a global scale, and help you understand, like, if your teams have got the right resources in the right places to kind of mitigate any risk that's arising. One of the great things about this is that I think if you can strengthen your internal control environment with AI, it actually makes your external audit easier as well,
Yeah.
because we talk about potentially, more continuous external audit. And part of that has to be being able to place reliance on internal controls. Like when I go and talk to external audit firms outside of kind of companies that are doing kind of large publicly listed companies, that control environments in smaller companies are very, very mixed, and it's very difficult to place reliance on their internal controls. and therefore do less testing from an audit perspective.
Yep.
So if companies have the opportunity to use AI to have a stronger internal control environment, that also means the burden of audit should therefore theoretically be less. So you should have a smoother audit, and that means that they can test less things in order to gain assurance. So that should streamline the entire financial reporting and certification process. So I think it's going to be a really interesting couple of years, actually, as these technologies start to get adopted, because it really turns finance from a function which is maybe just, managing resources to something where we can actually start to identify where you can increase operational efficiency, or improve like your top line and bottom line, because you're able to kind of mitigate unusual operations quicker. So yeah, there's loads of opportunity there.
Yeah. And how much automation will there be? I think you mentioned that that currently still audit or assurance, I think in general, is a quite manual and ad hoc procedure. One of the keywords I heard in what you just explained is continuous, like doing things more automated and doing things more continuous. And I think those are two themes that AI will really like strengthen, and that will also, frankly, as a CFO, will create a lot of value for me. So if I can get away from from an audit that's done once a year, maybe broken down, but essentially that's an ad hoc event where I look at where my financials are looked at, into something that can happen basically every month or even every day, and then becomes, I think, the lines between the audit and my finance processes will increasingly blur, as the technology will allow me to be actually increasingly in real time doing the checking, and maybe the technology is already doing actually the financial transactions. How much automation do you think we can? What is the end state, and where are we currently? Like what needs to happen to actually get there?
So I think in terms of automation, there's a couple of things, right, that could end up being barriers to like complete automation. And to be honest with you, one of the things about large language models in particular is that they're non-deterministic, so they can produce different results. And if you think about agentic AI and there's different kinds of automation you can have in finance, right? So some firms have started to implement automation in finance through RPA technology, which is deterministic. So it's kind of much more routine, right? It'll read something, OCR something, post it to the ledger. Fine. There's still opportunities for error, right, in that technology, but like it's not thinking in any way, right? I think there are further opportunities for automation, and the more automation that you do, potentially it de-risks the transactions in certain ways, but it also could introduce risk in other ways. So I think and then you will have, what I think you will have is you'll have a layer on top which is scanning those transactions that are being automatically posted to detect whether anything has been incorrectly posted, right? So you're going to have these layers of automation. So you'll have automation in posting, probably automation in checking, and then you might have a third layer, which is like an automated investigation layer. So say something looks like it's unusual, in theory, you could go back to source documentation in an automated way as well. But I think for the moment, human in the loop, so having a human reviewing kind of some of these automation flows and where there are anomalies being detected is actually quite important, because it just makes there's some level of supervision, right? One of the things about having these like layers of automation is that you've got opportunities for like the risk to kind of propagate through these automation layers and like potentially increase, because you say you've got automated posting and it posts something slightly wrong, and then you've got something that goes and says, oh, this looks slightly different, but then the automated investigation kind of investigates it and says,
Yep.
oh yeah, it seems to be okay. No one's checked it. But you think you've got this like warm and fuzzy feeling inside because you've got these 3 layers and you think they all work effectively. So I think human in the loop is probably going to be quite important still, because it kind of there needs to be some supervision, but there is a reasonable amount of automation available, I think, for finance today.
Yeah. I must say the theme of combining technology or AI with human intelligence, it has always stuck with me. I think it's the story of how PayPal actually that PayPal tells, or the PayPal founder tell, that's how they actually turned it into a viable company and got on top of fraud. It wasn't that humans could solve it. It wasn't that they could build tech to solve the problem. It was the core idea that actually, if we put the two together, we can 10x what humans can do. And that really created a massive change. And I think that's probably the right way of looking at automation with AI right now as well. No one expects that tomorrow, in a very short time frame, we can fully automate. But if we can already, do away with all those routine tasks and automate those routine tasks that, basically have a low amount of the human intelligence that's required in an audit, but a lot of the human effort, I think that's a great place to start, and that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to double down on one thing, and we haven't really mentioned it yet, but the audit world, and that's also the big audit firms are increasingly talking about continuous audit, and I think the way you describe these different layers of automation. How does it relate to how your auditor, an external auditor, will in the future interact with you and your data and actually carry out the audit?
Yeah, so I think so there's a couple of things. One of the reasons continuous audit is quite appealing to external audit firms is because
qualify for a second. Sorry if I interrupt you. Qualify for a second what it actually is. What's the vision of continuous audit?
Continuous audit. That's a big question. I think so for me, and I think there's probably differences of opinion about what truly continuous audit is, but I think in audit today, there are big peaks in work because of financial year ends, right? Most companies align their financial year end to the tax year end. So you get like this huge volume of work around these the kind of December 31st, or in the UK like March 31st. And because of this, they have to kind of dynamically scale the workforce, and you end up doing 100 hours a week, right? Like, I remember doing kind of sampling at like 3 a.m. in the morning as an auditor. Do not recommend that, by the way. And it puts a lot of pressure on people. You get a lot of burnout. And so from a workforce perspective, continuous auditing would be great because it means that you're gradually generating assurance such that when you get to the financial year end, really you're doing work on like the balances at year end, like the balance sheet. Obviously you have to look at kind of what's in place at the date of the balance sheet. So there's always going to be work you have to do at year end. You can't kind of push that work earlier to a certain extent. But one of the things I think is possible is actually, as an auditor, you could certainly predict the year-end balances through data analytics. So you could say, oh, this is my expectation of what the year-end balance is going to be, and compare it to what's actually in the trial balance. So even then, AI and analytics could support you in smoothing out even that peak of doing your balance sheet audit. So I think continuous audit, one of the downsides potentially for the customers of this audit is that you're probably going to have your auditors coming in on a more frequent basis to test the anomalies that have been identified through whatever continuous auditing system you're using. But the reality is, in like most listed companies, like your auditors are coming in at least quarterly, if not more frequently. They're kind of always there, really, because of the nature of your business, and you're having to produce your quarterly financial statements anyway. So continuous audit is really just going to start to smooth out that work. But it also means that the business gets to correct any kind of process deficiencies or control weaknesses that are causing things to be detected by the audit that require investigation. So it means that actually you as a business, you get to remediate any issues kind of much earlier on before you get to kind of your annual financial statement. So I think continuous audit has benefits for both the external audit firms that are providing that service, but also for the businesses themselves, because it means like you're going to, remediate issues that might have had an impact on, your audit opinion, or they could have even led to financial loss, right? So there's lots of potential for improvement there, which is really positive for businesses.
Yeah, I would second that. I think and that's really the theme of value, and the value that is created by the activity of the auditor can really have going into a more continuous mode can have a big impact on that, because if there's things to be found or to be identified, and might not only have to be purely accounting related findings. It could also be findings that actually might not be an accounting deficiency, but might actually point to a leakage in the business of either profits or revenue. If I can find that as soon as possible, and I can remedy it, that's pure value, or that's direct value to me as an operator in the company. And I think that really is bringing it back to me, saying that no one is really too excited about the annual audit coming up, the financial audit, annually coming up, that this could really transform the way the audit is seen and the value that the audit can really bring. And I think, from what I see is that there's a lot of auditors who are increasingly looking towards technology, the combination of technology enabling a more continuous audit, transforming the way really of what they provide to us as customers and the value they can bring. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. I actually think so. I think with audit, like being able to change the perception even of clients of audit, of what the audit does, and like increasing the value, probably makes audit a slightly more enjoyable profession to be in. Like I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but when I first started as an auditor, people really don't like auditors. And as a trainee, I remember I was going to find someone to talk about a cash reconciliation, and they hid under the desk from me because they did not want to talk. Anyway, but I think so. I think for auditors joining the profession, and people who have been in the profession a while, I think continuous audit offers them an opportunity to kind of be part of that value creation. Maybe not be seen as kind of the person to hide from, but be someone that people want to interact with, because they can give you insights about the business that perhaps you might not have found. So I think that'd be really positive. I also think that as people join the profession, there's an expectation that they will use technology to do audit. So expectations are changing about what it means to be an auditor, and if the profession is going to continue, it has to evolve, because young people expect to come in and be able to use technology in a different way. So I also, maybe I'm slightly biased because I am a data scientist as well as an auditor, but I think using advanced analytics makes the job more interesting. That's the bit that I find most interesting in audit, is really getting into kind of the patterns and understanding the business, and to that level of detail where you can actually find those insights. So I think it'll be a net positive for audit.
Great. I have two more questions for you. One is more in detail into the technology. The other one is more about the organizational and human aspects of this transition. But diving one more time a little bit deeper into the tech, given that's really a big part of your background. As we already discussed, when the term AI is now almost synonymous with LLMs, which I think is it's not wrong, but there's a lot more. And LLMs, you already alluded to it, especially in finance. I think there's a real tension, especially for us, practitioners. ChatGPT has created massive expectations what's going to happen. The stakeholders of companies have massive expectations on the impact. As CFOs, we are under pressure to use it to our advantage. And at the same time, I think once you start using them, you realize they are non-deterministic. So you can ask them the same question 3 times and get 3 different answers. And importantly, that is by design. And second, they are really built for text, language. They're not built for numerical data, which arguably is, the absolute backbone of finance. And so there's a real tension. We do like technology that is extremely deterministic, highly precise, repetitive, and very, very, therefore usable on financial data. So how do you see that? Can you maybe explain a little bit better? What is the field of AI that will work in finance? What are the roles or is the role that LLMs can play? What are the other pieces that need to come into place for this to actually work?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I think so. There's a couple of different pieces, right? So the first thing is, I think, understanding that large language models are not currently great at interpreting numeric data is kind of an essential, right? Because I think there are other technologies and other kinds of analytics and AI that can help you with this. And one of the things that obviously MindBridge is focusing on, but I'm sure other companies are as well, is being able to fuse the two together. Because you want to have the trust and reliability of an algorithm or a heuristic that's been written to produce precise results on top of your data. So, like, for example, creating a trial balance, wouldn't use an LLM to do that, but you want to be able to validate the results, right? So you want to have complete transparency about any calculations that you're looking at that have been through an AI system. But there are ways in which you can capture what the LLMs have done or how they're being integrated into the system. So you can see things like chain of reasoning, or you can do things also to make the responses of LLMs more deterministic. So you can there's a parameter called temperature. So you can actually control like how different the responses you get from a particular LLM are. So when you're trying to engineer a system for accounting and finance where you want to be able to use natural language, so maybe you want to be able to ask questions of your data, or maybe you want to summarize the results of the data, you have to kind of balance the two, right? So you identify the best foundation model for this purpose. And obviously ChatGPT is one of the most popular, but there are a number of competing models now. So, Gemini is actually pretty good. Anthropic's Claude models are also pretty good. They're good at different things, right? Wouldn't necessarily use DeepSeek in a professional setting, but there are a number of different models actually out there, and so one of the things we do is we evaluate the quality of the responses actually. So we look at, okay, here's a test data set, how well did it summarize this for the business context, right? But it's really about combining tools which are good at data analysis with large language models, and then having complete traceability, particularly if you've got a multi-chain system. So to give you a concrete example, so an LLM, like I give it input, so I give it a prompt and it produces an output, right? In agentic AI, you're actually probably using a chain of LLMs. So you're actually what you do is you have a range of different system prompts for different agents, and they have a specific purpose, and they are instructed as to the expected output, right? So to give you an example, okay, so say I take a chatbot. I say to the system prompt is, you are thinking like a financial analyst, and this is the domain context that the user has been provided. Please suggest what analysis or what queries I might want to run against the data to answer questions they might have. And then you give it a sort of, and then you specify what you expect the response to be. So you might say, oh, please provide a JSON response, which has got this kind of structure. And then you might take the responses from that, and then you might take another LLM and then translate that into computer actionable code, right? So in this case, you can start to get quite complex a complex system where actually you've got multiple LLM responses that are being chained together, and then you have to evaluate how well does that fit together to get to a response. Now, this is where being able to show the user each of the individual steps of the process and what the LLM said in each step and how it combined to get to a result is really important. And so I think what people should be expecting to see is not like a black box, right? Not like, I ask a question and then I get a response at some point at the end. I think it's really important with finance systems that you're actually able to get into some of the detail and see some of the thought processes behind this, because it gives you more confidence in kind of how the results have been generated. And then, software like ours, we will actually make sure we've got evaluations in place to check that the query that has been run to produce the number that you're relying on is accurate and has actually been appropriately translated. So it's actually quite a complex problem to solve, but it's one that's really worthwhile solving, because being able to combine deep data analysis technologies with LLMs, which can kind of plan and suggest kind of work and kind of evaluate the responses, that's how you get to some really powerful systems. Yeah, I think, but transparency is super important, and I would expect that if you're an accounting and finance professional and you want to use these technologies, you should be looking for providers that are both transparent about how the system operates, but are also kind of getting third-party assurance around how it operates as well. Because, there are standards now, ISO 42001, around AI systems. I think it's really important people start to get these certifications, because it gives people much more confidence when they're using these technologies in an industry like accounting and finance, when it's pretty regulated and people really care, right, about the quality of the numbers. So sorry, I think that was a really long response, Matthias, but
Understood. We are almost out of time, but I want to switch gears and get away from the tech angle and take the more organizational and team and human angle. In your view, what should finance leaders do today to prep themselves and their organizations for the upcoming change, or for the change that is already starting? What do we do right now to be well prepared?
I think the most important thing to do, to be honest with you, is to encourage, well, for both yourself and your team to learn more about the technologies and what's available. I think that's really important. And actually, I always say this when I go to visit customers, and I say this on a lot of podcasts that I've been on. There is a lot available to people today from a data analytics perspective that they've probably not even used, right? In Excel, there's a Power Query. The Office 365 suite has Power Automate. In Office 365, there is a range of different tools you probably have available to you today as a finance professional, which can help you automate some of your existing finance flows. And so my approach is always to encourage people to start trying to use technologies they already have available, but also to kind of look out there and look into kind of the broader ecosystem and try some of these technologies, because maybe it's just me, but I always learn more from doing something than reading about stuff. But the other thing I would say is that the major professional bodies are starting to put out more and more content about AI and data analytics in finance. And so it's a really good opportunity for people from a CPD perspective to really go out and consume some of this content, because the more you know about it, the more confident you will be in kind of scoping even proof of concepts, but ultimately integrating these technologies into your finance function. So learn. Go out and learn how to do it, because I think it's going to change the profession.
I think you're absolutely spot on. With that, I think that's a good last, famous last words. We will go off. I will go off and learn some more about AI and finance, and I guess I will see you probably tomorrow at work. I thank you very much for taking the time. This was really a fascinating glimpse into what the future of audit will be like. And I'll read us out. Thank you, Rachel.
Great. Thanks, Matthias. Thanks, Matthias.
This episode was brought to you by MindBridge, the leader in AI-powered financial decision intelligence. MindBridge empowers finance teams to optimize performance through artificial intelligence. To learn more, visit us online at mindbridge.ai. I'm Matthias Steinberg. My guest was Rachel Kirkham, and this has been Burning Ledgers. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend about us. Thank you.